Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we're going to be talking about the return of Grim Batol as a dungeon to the War Within. It's going to be in the Season 1 dungeon rotation for Mythic Plus, so it's going to be available to do and reworked, I assume. And what we're going to do in this video is, because I enjoyed Grim Batol so much, what we can do too is we can actually show you the other dungeons real quick, just in case you are curious. So we have the 4 new dungeons. There's nothing to know about those really, right? Because we don't know what those dungeons are all about yet. And then we have Mists of Tyrannus Scythe and Necrotic Wake. These are very well figured out dungeons from Shadowlands. Siege of Borealis, a very well figured out dungeon from BFA. And now Grim Batol. So Grim Batol is the one old dungeon returning, like old dungeon returning. And I loved Grim Batol back when it was active. I actually enjoyed Cataclysm a decent amount, despite the fact that not everyone did or whatever. I don't really plan on playing Cataclysm Classic per se, but I did enjoy Cataclysm when it was active. So I thought for this video we could just kind of go through the dungeon, talk about how each thing might work for Mythic Plus environment, some of the mechanics and stuff like that, and just my general thoughts on it. First of all, I think this dungeon translates really well to Mythic Plus in terms of the bosses. I think the bosses have very modernized mechanics in some ways, not in every way, right? This is still a long time ago, right? When Cataclysm came out, but in some ways I think it does have very modernized mechanics. Now, first thing you get through here, so you're gonna have some little trogs in the room, then you have like a little patrol here, and then you're gonna have these 2 poles that are guarding the dragons. So obviously I'm a lot higher level than these, so I can just walk past them. But when this is on Mythic Plus, if they keep the same general layout, right, what I'm curious to know is, because something I always kind of wanted to do is, but you couldn't really do it back then, or at least I didn't play with good enough people to do it. But like, if you could like pull this stuff to the side and then just kill it with the dragons on the bombing run. I don't know if that even works, or if they're affected by the bombs or whatever. But that could be interesting. Or do you have like a tank, a night elf tank or something, or a rogue, gather everything up, let everyone else get on a dragon and then like vanish off, or like try to jump on before they reset or something like that, and do the bombing run without actually having to kill the trash? Do you skip everything as much as you can? Because you can, come over and, get this dragon out. Now, can you fly on it before you kill the stuff? It actually doesn't appear you can. So maybe you do actually have to kill the stuff in front of it. So I never actually got to try that back in the day, but that would be interesting in theory. So now can I fly on it? No. So do you have to kill everything before you can fly on it? This is really interesting to me. Okay, so yeah, so you do have to kill the trash before it activates. So I wonder if they're going to keep that. I imagine they would, if they're keeping the bombing run in general. So you actually have to kill it. So you'd probably like try to pull this all into one pole or something, and then get on the dragons and go. Maybe, yeah. I don't even know what else you would do there. Now, the impact of the flying. So I watched someone else's Dratnos. He had thoughts about this dungeon, and he mentioned he didn't want the bombing run to be too impactful. I kind of agree with that, because back in the day, you really only needed 2 or 3 people even doing the bombing run for it to be good enough, and you didn't need to kill everything. Now, for Mythic Plus, it's different. It's timed or whatever. But you didn't need to kill everything. Just a couple people doing the bombing run, though, would get everything down to like 10% health or 5% health, and you could just like run through and kill everything really quick. Even though, even with that, having a little bit of health, and the things were so low health too, that back in the day, of course, it wouldn't be like this now, but like you could just solo stuff as a DPS and stuff. So as long as it's like that, at least to like 2 or 3 people it have to be good or knowledgeable with the bombing run, then I think it'd be fine. The first boss in here, this was always one of the more tough bosses back in the day, so it has a lot to it. And what I mean by it's more modern is that like it does have a lot to this boss for an old. This is old. I mean, this is Cataclysm still. This is old, and it has a lot of like modern complexity. I don't even know if that's the word, but it has a lot of modern stuff to it. So we can look at the dungeon journal really quick here, if that doesn't pop up. All right, so then we have a bleeding wound. This is a heal off bleed. That still exists a lot of times in raids, or I'm assuming you can probably like stone form it off and stuff too. Blitz charges a random enemy. I think it might be the furthest enemy. It says random in here. But again, that's just kind of a normal thing that happens. Nowadays, it's more of like a 3 charge instead of just charging one person. Although you have, bosses that still just charge one person as well. That still exists. And then we have Ground Siege. Puts a thing on the ground that everyone has to run out of. Frenzy is like an enrage, which is interesting to have. We don't have that many enrages on dungeon bosses anymore. And then the summoning of the ads, right? So this is something that's, again, a little bit more modern day. This is where people would get really screwed up back in the day, when people weren't used to things being kind of difficult. And not to say that this is difficult, but it just is compared to other mechanics of the day. And so you have these trogs that come out, and the ones you need to be interrupted, you need to kill them, and you can't kill them near the boss. And you don't really want to be near them either, I think, when they die as a player either. And then there's like the regular trogs that just do an attack. Now, they need to be killed because even the regular attack will like kill down the tank. And you do want them tanked as much as you can because they will kill players as well. I do believe these things were all like slowable and stunnable back in the day. That's not to say that they will be now. But yeah, this boss caused a lot of trouble because the charge, like I said, I think it's on the furthest person. It doesn't necessarily mean it is. But it would always be like charging. A lot of times, especially back in the day, maybe your worst player would be standing furthest away and they'd just continually get charged. And so that person would die or whatever, and then you'd be down a person and messing up the trog stuff. And that's stuff that's still going to be considerations even in modern day with updated mechanics and updated health pools and stuff. This next boss it actually used to be really easy, in my opinion, this big boss here. He's actually reminds me a little bit of Sludge Fist, mostly just because of one mechanics that's like literally the same. So we pull him up here. I don't know why this keeps popping up. But he has this cave-in ability that's very similar to Sludge Fist from Castle Nathria, where the stuff falls from the ceiling and it puts. It's almost the same. It might be literally the same mechanic. And so you have that. And this was always considered a tank fight back in the day for obvious reasons. And basically, depending on what weapon he equips is what you have to do. When he has a shield, you have to stand behind him when you do damage, or else you're hitting the shield and it all gets absorbed. But then, like, the swords, it does a ton of damage. You need to, like, pop defensives, extra heals. And then when he has his mace, I believe the tank would kite usually in that case. Now, I don't know how that would work in modern day. And I also think that this fight, again, for modern day, might need 1 or 2 more mechanics, maybe something for the DPS to do. I know it was a melee DPS for this fight. I was a tank / melee DPS mostly, but I did still tank a lot back in Cataclysm. And I know but when I did melee DPS, I know there was pretty much nothing to do because you just walked around him a little bit when he had his shield on, and other than that, just don't pull threat when the tank was kiting him with his mace or whatever. But pretty straightforward fight. This one might need something added, a little bit more modernization with this particular fight after coming off of one that was already, pretty good. Now, for this one, again, you kited him around. You had the cave-ins coming around. You'd want to clear like this whole room usually, because especially if you had, a group that wasn't that good, which was just very common back in the day, you might have to kite him around like this whole room or whatever while you would fight him. Especially, and then, or, a lot of times you could like bank on one of your players dying early on in a fight or whatever, just from standing in a cave-in, just like standing in fire, and that would be the case there. So if you don't know, the bombing run that we talked about earlier, that still continues on through this area as well. So a lot of this stuff would be dead or nearly dead when you get to it. We can actually go a little bit faster. So hopefully, like I said, as far as bombing run goes, I just want it to be, cool still, because I always liked the bombing run as somebody who did it. And then I want it to be, though, like that you don't have to have all 5 people min-maxing to do it correctly or to be able to finish the dungeon or whatever. These mobs are here interesting because when you pull them, I don't know if it's a certain % health or if they just do it automatically, but they will actually summon like a dragon to come fight with them, and I could see those mobs being very difficult in Mythic Plus. In fact, a lot of these mobs, since you kill them on the bombing run, a lot of these mobs in general have a lot of interrupts that you need to do. Again, it's very modern in that sense because they kind of wanted to punish you if you didn't do the bombing run. But it actually kind of fits in. Punishing for Cataclysm is just like a normal pull for it, you know, it's easier than a normal pull, but kind of like a normal pull for Modern. So as we get to the third boss, um, this boss, I see some changes being needed for phase 2, but phase 1 was always kind of difficult for, again, back in the day. Things just, even if they weren't difficult, they felt more difficult. And the biggest issue was just the ad that it summoned. You have to deal with this ad. If it gets to you, it explodes. It does an incredible amount of damage, even on this difficulty, right? It does 494,000 damage. So obviously scaled up to Mythic, that will just one-shot you. And so you have to deal with the ad. It was always an issue because you are doing other mechanics as well. And then dealing with this ad was always an issue. I don't see that being a huge issue. It's similar to the ad on, oh, I don't even know. It's similar to the ad on, let's go to Dungeons of Dragonflight. It's similar to Neltharis? Yeah. The ad on right here on the last boss in Neltharis. He summons a fire ad. It's similar to that. Again, I think it'll be dealt with easier. Obviously, in modern day, you know, we don't really worry about that stuff. People use their slows and stuff a lot more actively if they need to be. There's not usually something just rampantly coming and charging and running you down. So I don't think it'll be an issue. They might actually have to just like increase the frequency or how you deal with it or whatever. But what I think really needs changes when he gets to low health, he summons Valiona, the dragon, and then they come up. And basically the dragon just does a frontal breath until you get her down to 20%. Then she runs away. And then you just deal with him at the very end. You basically just zerg him down for the last bit of his health. And so I think maybe Valiona is going to need some more mechanics as well. Because I vividly remember if you got to the dragon phase, it was pretty much free. Because she just did like a big frontal breath or whatever. So I think this fight also needs some stuff probably added at least during the dragon phase to make it more modern. And then we come to this last boss, which this last boss, I don't know how many of you do like time walking for Cataclysm or whatever ever. Whatever. I don't even know what I'm saying. But if you do this dungeon, right, with a bunch of people who don't know how to do it, this fight in particular can be a little bit rough because there's a lot of healing to the boss. So the big things that you probably do remember about the boss is he puts like a bunch of shadow on the ground. You have to stand in a safe spot basically that's going to be on one player and everyone has to stand there. And if you don't, not only do you take a ton of damage, but you also heal the boss for some of that damage taken. So that's something that you have to deal with. Then he also summons a couple of these ads to come try to hatch these eggs during the fight. These need dealt with immediately. Unless, of course, the ability is out that you do not want to touch them. There's an ability we can look at. Dungeons, Cataclysm, Batol. I'd have to find it. But there's an ability where you do not want to touch them when he puts it on. The ads will also try to heal him. It's the shield ability, Shield of Nightmares. The ads will also, if you don't deal with them right, you want to be dealing with these ads that are trying to hatch the eggs. After they hatch an egg, they'll also heal the boss, right? So there's a lot of potential healing to the boss here. And, you know, this could really cause some issues with bugs if one person's healing the boss, because it might cause you to not be able to finish the dungeon or finish the dungeon in time if this boss gets healed. And overall, this always was a really fun boss, to me at least. I remember healing this boss a lot, actually, for whatever reason, on my paladin. But yeah, this boss was always really fun to me. And again, I think this boss works out pretty well for modern day as well. Just in terms of it has enough mechanics, has enough going on. Very similar to the first boss in here. So overall, I think this is actually going to be a really cool dungeon. There's a ton of trash in here. And like I said, hopefully they do the bombing run correctly. Because that's really going to be the crux of this dungeon, is if they do the bombing run correctly. If they do, then I think people will actually really enjoy this dungeon and think it's actually pretty good. But if they do not do the bombing run correctly, you know, that could be an issue, right? Other things that I wonder about is, you know, and it actually just makes it cool if you can. I actually don't know. But, like, can you Warlock Gate across this? Can you double jump across it with a Demon Hunter or whatever? Because that could lead to some very interesting pulls. Is there a way to, like, gate across some of here or whatever? There could be some interesting routing, but you'd have to use tools to do it. if that stuff works. I don't know if it does or not, because I don't really want to jump down and die right now. I don't ever remember falling down though, so I don't know if you can or not. Kind of looks like you can though. So if you can jump down it, then I imagine you can jump over it as well. So that would be my thought process there. Overall though, like I said, probably a little work on the middle two bosses, and you need to get the bombing run correct for this to feel good. If they do the bombing run correct, now what might be really really cool, and it, just even as a test or whatever, right, is if the bombing run, it counts towards your percentage, right, and you can actually, like, let's say all 5 people are doing the bombing run really well. If you can get a ton of your percentage from it, I mean, that's kind of interesting, right? Although again, that increases the impact. You need all 5 players. That ruins a pug or whatever, because someone in your pug is going to go AFK during the bombing run. So maybe that's not the right way to do it. I don't know what the right way to do it is, but I guess it'll be a thing where we see it and it either feels right or it feels wrong when you first see it, and you just have to go from there and adjust it accordingly. But I like the idea of it. I loved this dungeon. It was always much more difficult than the other dungeons to me, and I think that's why I liked it the most back in Cataclysm. I'm trying to think of the other dungeons that, like Blackrock Caverns, I never felt the same way about. Lost City of Tolvir. Yeah, Temple, or we did Throne of the Tides recently. Vortex Pinnacle we've done. Yeah, the Stone Core. This boss, this dungeon always felt a little bit different in a way that was, to me, it was cooler. But that's my thoughts on it here. I wanted to kind of go through this and kind of just basically live, kind of like pick my own brain in a way, and think what could be good, what could be better, and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to this in the War Within. It's also, I also main a dwarf character, so obviously I like this big dwarf city of a dungeon. But yeah, that's it for this one. As always, I do ask you please subscribe to the channel. Helps me out a lot. And other than that, everybody have a good one.